I didn't expect to see her name on my phone again. Not after 3 years of silence. Not after the way we ended things. Not after I spent months convincing myself I was finally over her. Yet there it was, lighting up my screen at 11:47 p.m. Maya. For a full minute, I just stared at it. My thumb hovered over the phone, my chest tight in that familiar, stupid way it used to get whenever she entered my orbit. I told myself not to answer. I told myself this wasn't my problem anymore. Then the phone buzzed again. A message this time. Hey, I know this is random. I wouldn't ask if I had anyone else. I'm getting married next month. I need help. Please. I laughed under my breath, the sound bitter and tired. Getting married. Of course she was. I locked my phone and tossed it onto the couch, pacing my apartment like that would somehow shake the feeling loose. We hadn't spoken since the night she packed a bag and walked out, saying she needed clarity and space and all the other words people use when they don't want to say the real reason. I eventually learned she'd been seeing someone else before she left. She never admitted it, but the timeline told me everything. And now she needed help. I poured myself a drink I didn't need and sat down, staring at the dark screen. I thought about ignoring it, blocking her, protecting whatever peace I'd built. Instead, I unlocked the phone. What kind of help? I typed. Her reply came instantly, like she'd been waiting with the phone in her hand. Wedding stuff. Logistics. My mom's sick. My maid of honor bailed, and everything is falling apart. You always knew how to handle chaos. I trust you. That word hit harder than it should have. Trust. I almost told her no right then. Almost. But curiosity crept in, slow and dangerous. And if I'm being honest, so did something else. A part of me that never really stopped caring. A part that wanted closure, or maybe punishment, or maybe just to see who she'd become. Just help until the wedding, she added. After that, I won't bother you again. I promise. I should have recognized that promise for what it was worth. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her the next day. She looked different, not in a dramatic way. Same dark hair, same familiar smile that used to disarm me. But there was a tension under her skin now, like she was holding herself together with effort. She hugged me when she saw me, tentative, as if unsure whether she was allowed. I didn't hug her back at first. Then I did, and immediately hated myself for how natural it felt. Over coffee, she unloaded everything. The venue had double booked. Her planner quit. Her mother's health was declining faster than expected. The groom was busy with work and handling things on his end. That part stuck with me. What's his end? I asked. She hesitated, just for a second. He's under a lot of pressure, she said. This job is huge for him. What does he do again? She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Consulting. Finance stuff. You wouldn't be interested. That was the first small crack. Over the next 2 weeks, I found myself deeply involved. I called vendors, negotiated contracts, smoothed over disasters. It was muscle memory. Maya leaned on me the way she used to, venting late at night, trusting me with her stress and fear. The emotional lines blurred faster than I expected. Sometimes she'd look at me like she was remembering us. Sometimes she'd go quiet when I mentioned the past. Once, after too many glasses of wine while finalizing seating charts, she said, I don't know how I ended up here. I didn't ask what she meant. I was afraid of the answer. I still hadn't met the groom. Every time I asked, something came up. He was traveling. He was in meetings. He'd join us later. It was strange, but weddings are strange. People get weird. I told myself not to read into it. Then, one evening, Maya asked if I could pick something up from his office. Some documents he'd forgotten at home. She gave me the address casually, like it meant nothing. My stomach dropped as soon as I saw it, because I knew that building. I'd worked there once, briefly, a few years ago, long enough to remember the logo, the security desk, the mirrored elevators. It was the same company that had destroyed my career. I told myself it was coincidence. Big city, lots of firms. I didn't want to spiral. Still, my hands were shaking when I signed in at the desk. The receptionist glanced at the name on the pickup slip and smiled politely. "Oh, you're here for Daniel?" Daniel. The room tilted. I hadn't heard that name in years, but my body remembered it instantly. My pulse spiked. My mouth went dry. Daniel wasn't just some guy. He was my former mentor, my boss, the man who took credit for my work, buried evidence, and quietly ensured I'd never work in that industry again after I reported financial irregularities he was responsible for. The man who smiled in my face while dismantling my future. I forced myself to breathe. "Yes," I said, my voice steady despite everything. "I'm picking up something he left." She handed me an envelope and pointed down the hall. "His office is at the end. He said you could leave it on his desk." I walked slowly, every step feeling heavier than the last. My mind raced through possibilities, trying to convince me this wasn't what it looked like. I reached the office door. It was open. Daniel was inside. Older, maybe. A few more lines around his eyes. Same posture. Same confident, careless presence. He looked up when I stepped in, and then he smiled. "Hey," he said easily, "you must be Maya's friend." Friend. My hands clenched around the envelope. He had no idea who I was. Or maybe he did, and he was pretending. That was his specialty. "You're the groom," I said. "That's me." He stood, extending a hand. "Daniel." I didn't take it. Recognition flickered in his eyes then. Just a flash. So brief, I might have imagined it. "Oh," he said softly, "it's you." The room went quiet. So I said, my voice tight, "You're marrying her." He chuckled, shaking his head like this was some funny coincidence. Small world, right? I thought of Maya's late-night stress, her confusion, her comment about not knowing how she ended up here. And suddenly, everything felt wrong. Daniel leaned back against his desk, studying me. "Look," he said, lowering his voice. "Whatever happened back then, that was business. No need to bring old grudges into something beautiful. Something beautiful." I left without saying another word. That night, I didn't sleep. Every memory resurfaced. The meetings, the documents, the whistle I blew that no one listened to. The way my name was quietly erased from projects I built. And now he was about to marry the woman I once loved. The next day, Maya noticed something was off. "You okay?" she asked while we were reviewing final details. I looked at her, really looked at her. She was exhausted, nervous, trying so hard to convince herself this was right. "Who is Daniel to you?" I asked. She frowned. "What do you mean? How did you meet?" "At a charity gala," she said quickly. Too quickly. Why? I considered telling her everything right then, exposing him, burning the whole thing down. But doubt crept in. What if she didn't believe me? What if she thought I was jealous, bitter, trying to sabotage her happiness? Daniel was charming, powerful, respected. I was the ex. So I stayed quiet. For now. Because if I was going to say something, I needed proof. And deep down, I suspected Daniel hadn't changed at all. He'd just gotten better at hiding it. And if he was still the same man, then Maya wasn't just marrying her future. She was walking straight into a trap. And I had 30 days before she said, "I do." 30 days to decide whether helping her meant saving her, or destroying everything she thought she wanted. I didn't confront Maya that night. I told myself it was because I needed proof, something solid enough that she couldn't brush it off as bitterness or coincidence. But the truth was uglier. Part of me was afraid of what she'd say, afraid she'd choose him anyway, afraid I'd watch her walk into the same kind of manipulation I'd barely survived and realize I couldn't stop it. Daniel was always good at controlling the narrative. I knew how he operated. He never left fingerprints. He never sent the email himself. He never made the final call on paper. Everything dirty passed through someone else first. Assistants, juniors, independent consultants, people who took the fall while he smiled and climbed. So I started digging quietly. I still had contacts. Not many, but enough. People who owed me favors. People who'd been burned by him too, even if they didn't fully realize it at the time. I took time off work under the excuse of personal stuff and treated it like a second job. Late nights, old emails, archived files, corporate registries, shell companies. It didn't take long before patterns started to appear. Daniel was still doing the same thing. Different company, different clients, same playbook, inflated reports, misrepresented risk, money quietly redirected through layers so dense it looked legitimate unless you knew exactly where to look. And the worst part was that it wasn't just unethical, it was illegal in ways that would ruin a lot of lives if it ever surfaced, including Maya's, because her name was on some of the paperwork, not as an executive, not even as a decision maker, but as a supporting officer in a couple of charitable foundations Daniel controlled. Foundations that were being used to move money. She probably thought she was helping, probably trusted him, probably signed where he told her to sign. The same way I once trusted him when he said, "Just push this through, I'll take responsibility." I felt sick. I want to go straight to her, to show her everything. But again, doubt crept in. Daniel would deny it. He'd say I forged it, twisted it, took things out of context. So I kept digging. A week later, I found what I needed. An internal audit memo. Buried, never officially released. Written by a junior analyst who'd since left the firm under mutual agreement. The memo laid out discrepancies in black and white. Dates, amounts, transfers, and Daniel's initials were on it. He hadn't signed it. He'd just initialed the margins. A habit I remembered well. That was enough for me. But timing mattered. Maya was getting more stressed by the day. The wedding was getting closer. Her mother had been hospitalized. Daniel was suddenly traveling even more. She confided in me one night, voice shaking, that she felt like she was planning a wedding alone. He says it'll all be worth it once things settle, she said. But what if they never do? I almost told her then. Instead, I asked, "Have you ever felt like he doesn't tell you everything?" She went quiet. "I trust him," she said finally, but it sounded rehearsed, like something she practiced saying to herself. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to ambush her. I wasn't going to humiliate her in front of people. I wasn't going to blow this up for revenge. I was going to give her the truth in a way she could actually hear. I invited her over under the pretense of reviewing final details. No wine, no distractions, just the two of us. When she arrived, she looked tired, fragile, like someone holding a breath they didn't realize they were holding. "What's going on?" she asked as soon as she sat down. "You've been acting weird." I took a deep breath. "I need you to listen, and I need you not to interrupt until I'm done." That scared her. I could see it. I started at the beginning. Not with Daniel. With me. With my old job. With the way my career ended. With how I tried to do the right thing and got a raise for it. Her eyes widened as pieces clicked into place. "You never told me all this," she whispered. "I didn't want to sound bitter," I said. "Or weak." Then I told her who Daniel was. Not the groom. Not the charming consultant. The man behind the scenes. The one who smiled while destroying people quietly. She shook her head immediately. "No, that's not him. He wouldn't." I slid the documents across the table. She picked them up, hands trembling. She read slowly, then faster. Then she stopped, staring at a page like it had punched her in the chest. "That's my signature," she said softly. "Yes," I replied, "and I don't think you knew what you were signing." Silence filled the room. Her breath became shallow. She stood up, pacing, running her hands through her hair. "He said it was for donations. For tax stuff. He said his lawyers handled everything." "I know," I said gently. "That's how he works." She looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw fear bloom in her eyes. Not just fear of losing a relationship, but fear of what this meant for her life. "What do I do?" she asked. That was the moment I'd been dreading. "Whatever you decide," I said, "has to be because you want to protect yourself. Not because of me. Not because of the wedding. Not because of what people will think." She sank back into the chair, covering her face. For a long time, she didn't say anything. Then she whispered, "If I call this off, everything explodes." "Yes," I said, "but if you don't, it might explode later. And worse." She nodded slowly. The next few days were hell. She confronted Daniel without telling him I was involved. I stayed out of it completely. That was important. This had to be her choice. When she told me how it went, her voice was flat. He didn't deny it, she said. He just minimized it. Said it was normal. Said everyone does it. So I was overreacting and letting old ghosts poison me. Old ghosts. That told me everything. Then he got angry. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just cold. He told her if she walked away now, she'd ruin her reputation. That people would ask questions. That lawyers would get involved. That she owed him loyalty. That was when she finally saw him. The wedding was canceled 2 weeks before the date. Officially, it was personal reasons. Unofficially, Daniel disappeared. Not overnight. Not in a movie-style escape. But quietly. Resignations. Offices closing. Phone numbers going dead. An investigation followed. Slowly. Painfully. The kind that doesn't make headlines until years later. Maya cooperated fully. She was cleared. Barely. It cost her financially. Emotionally. Socially. Some people believed her. Some didn't. Her mother recovered enough to go home. That mattered more than anything else. As for us, we didn't rush into anything. We didn't pretend the past didn't exist. We talked. A lot. About mistakes. About choices. About how easily trust can turn into blindness. One night, months later, she asked me, "Do you think you came back into my life to save me?" I thought about it for a long time. "No," I said. "I think you came back into my own. We're not some perfect ending. We're careful. We're honest. We don't promise things we can't guarantee. But there's peace in that. And every now and then, when I think about how close she came to tying her life to a man like Daniel, I'm reminded of how thin the line is between the life you imagine and the one you barely escape. If you were in Maya's place, would you have wanted to know the truth, even if it meant blowing everything up? Or would you have walked down the aisle and hoped for the best? Let me know what you think in the comments. And if stories like this make you think a little deeper about trust and timing, consider liking and subscribing so you don't miss the next one. I didn't find out my husband was lying because of a text message or a lipstick stain. I found out because our security cameras sent me a notification at 2:17 a.m. while I was brushing my teeth. The alert wasn't unusual by itself. We lived in a quiet neighborhood, but the camera sometimes picked up stray cats or passing cars. I almost ignored it. Almost. Then I saw the preview image. Our front door. Opening. Slowly. From the inside. I stared at my phone, toothbrush frozen in my mouth, watching the live feed load. The timestamp blinked. The porch light flicked on. And then I saw him. My husband. Fully dressed. Shoes on. Keys in hand. He stepped outside, looked around like he was checking for witnesses, and gently closed the door behind him. My heart started pounding so hard it felt like it was shaking my ribs. Because my husband was supposed to be asleep. In our bed. Right behind me. I turned my head slowly toward the bedroom. The bed was empty. The sheets were cold on his side. For a few seconds, my brain tried to protect me. Maybe he couldn't sleep. Maybe he went for a walk. Maybe he just needed air. But then the camera caught something else. A woman's silhouette waiting at the edge of the driveway. She stepped into the porch light and smiled at him. That smile did something ugly to my stomach. It wasn't nervous. It wasn't rushed. It was familiar, comfortable, like she'd done this before. He didn't hesitate. He walked straight to her. They hugged. Not a polite hug. Not an awkward one. The kind where bodies melt together like gravity does the work for you. I dropped the toothbrush into the sink. My hand was shaking so badly I had to sit on the edge of the bathtub. I watched them talk for a moment, their heads closed, their voices silent to me, but their body language screaming intimacy. Then she reached for his hand, and they walked away together, disappearing out of frame. I don't remember how long I sat there after the screen went dark. Minutes, maybe longer. What I do remember is that I didn't cry. Not yet. I went back into the bedroom, sat on my side of the bed, and stared at the indentation where he should have been. I tried to replay the last few months in my head, looking for cracks. The late work nights, the sudden gym obsession, the way he'd started taking phone calls outside, the way he'd flinch when I touched his phone. All of it lined up now, forming a picture I hadn't wanted to see. I checked the camera history. My hand steadied as something colder than fear took over. Calculation. I scrubbed back through the footage, and that's when I realized this wasn't new. There were alerts from other nights. Times I'd been asleep. Times I'd been out of town visiting my sister. Times I'd had migraines and gone to bed early. Same routine. Same woman. Same hug. Sometimes she stayed longer. Sometimes they left together. Sometimes she arrived after midnight and left just before dawn. Once, she kissed him goodbye right on the porch. Right where our neighbors could see. Right where our wedding photos were taken years earlier. I felt something tear inside me. Slow and quiet. We had been married 9 years. No kids by choice. Or at least what I thought was a shared choice. We had built a life that looked solid from the outside. Dinner parties, holidays, weekend trips, a house we renovated together, and apparently a lie that lived right under our roof. I didn't confront him when he came back. That surprised me too. He slipped into bed around 4 a.m., careful not to wake me, like I was still part of the equation. I kept my breathing slow and even my back turned to him, my mind racing. He smelled different, not perfume, something subtler, like another space, another life clinging to him. He fell asleep quickly. I didn't. By morning, I had a plan. I went through the day like everything was normal. Made coffee, asked him about his walk. He didn't even blink when he lied. Couldn't sleep, he said. Needed air. I nodded, smiled, kissed his cheek. The lie slid off his tongue like muscle memory. That hurt more than anything else. After he left for work, I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. I didn't call my friends. I opened my laptop. If he had a double life, I was going to learn everything about it. I started small. Phone records, credit card statements, location history on the shared tablet he forgot was synced to his account. Patterns emerged quickly. Restaurants we'd never been to together. A hotel on the other side of town, booked monthly. A second email address. And then I found the messages. Not on his phone, on his work tablet. He must have thought it was safer there. They weren't graphic. That almost made them worse. They were domestic. Arguments about groceries. Jokes about coworkers. Complaints about stress. Plans for the future. Future. With her. One message froze my blood. I hate lying to her, he'd written. But I can't blow everything up yet. Yet. Like destruction was scheduled. I scrolled further. She replied, I know. I'm just tired of waiting. Waiting for what? I found the answer 2 pages later. She still doesn't know about the house, he wrote. Once it's done, we'll figure it out. The house. My house. The one in my name. The one my inheritance paid for. The room spun. I pulled up property records. There it was. A second property. Recently purchased. In his name. And hers. Joint ownership. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen, my pulse roaring in my ears. This wasn't just an affair. It was a replacement. He wasn't cheating on me. He was transitioning away from me. Slowly, quietly, methodically, and I was funding it. I laughed then. A short, broken sound that scared me with how empty it felt. By the time he came home that evening, I had copied everything. Screenshots, downloads, backups, cloud storage, an offline drive hidden in my closet. Evidence. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted control. He walked in, loosened his tie, kissed me on the forehead like he always did. How was your day? He asked. Fine, I said. It wasn't a lie, because something inside me had already detached. Dinner tasted like nothing. His voice sounded distant. I watched him laugh at a show we'd seen a dozen times before, and all I could think was how well he played his role. That night, when he reached for me in bed, I gently moved his hand away. Headache, I said. He hesitated, then rolled over. Relief washed over his face. That hurt too. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, no longer wondering if my marriage was over, only how it was going to end, and whether I would let him write the final chapter, or if I would. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm, not because I was rested, but because my body had learned a new rhythm overnight. A quiet, alert tension, like something feral had taken over and decided sleep was no longer useful. He was still asleep beside me, breathing evenly, one arm flung across my pillow like he owned the space. I studied his face the way you study a stranger on a train. Close enough to observe, distant enough to feel nothing. 9 years of marriage, and this was the first time I realized I didn't know who he really was. I slipped out of bed without waking him and went straight to the kitchen. I made coffee the way I always did. Same mug, same routine. Muscle memory is a strange thing. It keeps going even when the heart has checked out. While the coffee brewed, I opened my laptop again. This time, I wasn't looking for proof. I already had that. I was looking for leverage. The more I dug, the clearer it became that his double life wasn't just emotional. It was logistical. He'd been careful, but not careful enough. Small financial overlaps, shared calendars, documents saved with sloppy file names. And then I found something that made my hands go cold. A draft email, unsent, addressed to a lawyer. Subject line, options. It wasn't long, just a few questions. About separation, about asset division, about timelines. He hadn't sent it yet, but he had written it, which meant this wasn't impulsive. This wasn't confusion. This was planning. I closed the laptop and stared out the kitchen window as the sun came up, washing the neighborhood in soft light. Our neighbor's sprinklers clicked on. A dog barked somewhere down the street. Normal life carrying on. I realized then that I had two choices. I could confront him, cry, beg, demand answers, let him steer the narrative, apologize, maybe even gaslight me into thinking this was somehow mutual. Or I could stay quiet and let him keep thinking I was unaware. That second option terrified me, but it also gave me something I hadn't felt in days. Power. I chose silence. For weeks, I became the perfect wife. I laughed at his jokes, asked about his day, cooked dinners he liked, even initiated conversations about future vacations, just vague enough not to raise suspicion. He relaxed. That was the scariest part. The more normal I acted, the more careless he became. He started leaving his phone face up, taking calls in the same room, slipping details by accident. Once, he mentioned the other house without realizing it. Traffic was awful near the place, he said, then froze. What place? I asked casually, not even looking at him. Oh, work, he said quickly. New client. I nodded and kept scrolling on my phone. Inside, I was memorizing everything. Dates, names, patterns. And then one night, the camera alert came again. This time, I didn't panic. I watched calmly as he stepped outside, but the woman didn't appear. Instead, he waited. Minutes passed, and he pulled out his phone, typed something, frowned. A few seconds later, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Hey, I don't know how else to do this. We need to talk. My heart didn't race. It sank. I replied, Who is this? She answered almost immediately. I'm the woman your husband has been seeing. There it was. Not dramatic, not cruel, just blunt. I sat on the couch, phone in my lap, the camera feed still open in front of me, watching my husband pace the driveway like a caged animal. I typed, I know. There was a pause. Then, yes. Another pause, longer this time. I'm so sorry, she wrote. I didn't know he was still with you at first. I almost laughed. Still with me, as if I were a leftover. I asked a question that had been burning quietly in my chest. Are you planning a future with him? The typing bubble appeared, disappeared, appeared again. He said he was leaving. Of course he did. He said it was complicated, that he just needed time. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. How much time? I asked. After the house paperwork finalized, she admitted. I closed my eyes. There was again. The house. I sent her a single message. That house is mine. She didn't reply for a long time. When she finally did, her message was short. What do you mean? I explained. Not emotionally, not angrily, factually. Inheritance, date, payments, everything. Silence. On the camera, I saw my husband check his phone again, his face draining of color. She wrote back. He told me he bought it himself. I didn't respond. I let that sit. 10 minutes later, the camera caught her car, pulling into the driveway. She stepped out. He rushed toward her, gesturing wildly. They argued, not quietly. She shoved something into his chest, his phone, I realized. Then she got back in her car and drove off. He stood there alone for a long moment, shoulders slumped. Then he came inside. I was sitting on the couch, phone in my hand, waiting. He stopped when he saw me. His mouth opened, closed. Did you? He started. I know, I said. That was all. He collapsed in a chair across from me, like his bones had given up. He didn't deny it, didn't defend himself, didn't even cry. He just said, I didn't mean for it to happen like this. I looked at him for a long time. What way did you mean it to happen? I asked. He had no answer. The conversation that followed wasn't explosive. It was worse. It was quiet, clinical. We talked logistics, finals, living arrangements. He admitted he'd planned to move out once the other house was ready. He admitted he'd been lying for over a year. He admitted he thought I'd handle it better if he waited. That sentence did something irreversible to me. I want a divorce, I said. He nodded, as if that had always been the plan. He moved out 2 weeks later, not to the other house. She didn't want him anymore. Turns out, she didn't enjoy being lied to either. The house went on the market. I forced the sale through legal channels. He had no claim. The money came back to me. All of it. The quiet after he left was strange. Too quiet. I slept on my side of the bed for weeks before finally changing the sheets. The camera alerts stopped. The driveway stayed empty at night. People asked what happened. I didn't overshare. I just said, we wanted different things. It wasn't a lie. Months later, I ran into him at a grocery store. He looked smaller somehow, tired. We exchanged polite hellos. Nothing more. When I walked away, I realized something surprising. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel victorious. I felt free, not because I won, but because I didn't let someone rewrite my reality without my consent. Sometimes people don't betray you loudly. They do it quietly, carefully, believing you'll never notice. But noticing changes everything. If you were in my place, would you have confronted him immediately or waited like I did? And if you stayed till the end of this story, take a second to share what you would have done and follow along for more real stories where truth shows up when people least expect it. I never planned to read the letter. It was folded once, cleanly, slid between two old property documents inside a metal trunk that smelled like rust and camphor. I was only there because my mother had called that morning, her voice unsteady, asking me to come over and help her sort a few things. That alone should have warned me. My mother never asked for help. She commanded it, organized it, controlled it. The woman ran our house like a small government office, complete with rules, schedules, and consequences. So when she said she felt tired, something in my chest tightened. She was sitting on the floor when I arrived, surrounded by old files. Not crying, just staring at nothing. You okay? I asked. She smiled too quickly. Yes, just decluttering. I knelt down and started helping without pushing. Old electricity bills, insurance papers, school certificates, boring, harmless stuff, until I lifted the trunk. Don't open that, she said sharply. The tone wasn't anger. It was fear. I froze. Why? It's private. That word didn't belong in our house. Privacy had never existed between us. I was raised on full transparency, or at least the illusion of it. She knew where I was at all times. I knew what she wanted me to know. I opened it anyway. That was the moment everything shifted. Inside were documents I'd never seen. Legal papers, bank statements, a birth certificate. Not mine. My name wasn't on it. I picked it up slowly, my pulse roaring in my ears. The paper felt heavier than it should have. What is this? I asked. She didn't answer. I turned it toward her. Mom. Her face collapsed. Not dramatically, just deflated, like a structure that had been standing on borrowed time. I always knew this day would come, she said quietly. The room felt smaller, the walls closer. Knew what? I whispered. She closed her eyes. That you'd find out. Find out what? The words were forming in my head, but my mouth refused to say them. I was suddenly 7 again, standing in the kitchen after breaking a glass, knowing punishment was coming but not knowing how bad. "That's not my birth certificate," I said. "No," I swallowed. "Then whose is it?" She took a long breath. "Yours." The world tilted. "That doesn't make sense," I said quickly. "My name isn't there. You were born with a different one." I laughed. A sharp, hollow sound. "Stop. This isn't funny." She didn't smile. I felt dizzy. "Why would you lie about something like that?" "I didn't lie," she said. "I protected you." "From what? From who?" My head buzzed as I sat down hard on the floor. Memories started rearranging themselves. Moments I'd never questioned suddenly felt off. Why I didn't look like her. Why relatives always said I was lucky to have been chosen. Why no one ever talked about my early childhood. How old was I? I asked. She hesitated. That hesitation hurt more than any answer. Almost 3. 3. I had lived another life for 3 years. Where did I come from? I asked. She didn't answer right away. She reached into the trunk and pulled out another paper. This one yellowed. "A letter. That was written by your real mother," she said. I stared at it. "She wanted you to have it someday," my mother continued. "But not like this." My hand shook as I unfolded it. The handwriting was uneven, rushed, like someone writing against time. "If you're reading this, it means I couldn't protect you the way I wanted to. I'm so sorry. I loved you from the moment I knew you existed, but love isn't always enough. Sometimes survival makes monsters out of people who mean well." My vision blurred. I looked up. "She's dead." My mother nodded once. Something inside me cracked. Not loudly. Quietly. A deep fracture. "How did she die?" I asked. "She didn't," my mother said. That snapped my head up. "She disappeared," she corrected. "And it wasn't an accident. The air left my lungs." "What do you mean?" She stood up slowly, like her legs might give out. "Your biological father was dangerous. Not violent in the way people expect, but controlling. Smart. The kind of man who doesn't raise his voice because he never needs to." I felt sick. "She tried to leave him," my mother continued. "He made sure she couldn't." I stood too, anger rising fast and wild. "Then why wasn't I with family? Why wasn't I told?" "Because there was no family left who could protect you," she said. "And because if he ever found you, your life would have been over before it started." I shook my head. "This sounds insane." "I know. Then explain this." I snapped, holding up the birth certificate. "Explain why you erased my identity." She looked at me with something I'd never seen before. "Guilt. I didn't erase you," she said. "I saved you." The room went silent. "You stole me," I said. Her face crumpled. "I rescued you. Without telling me, you were a child. I'm not now." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Whatever she'd been about to say, she decided I wasn't ready. Or maybe she wasn't. "Who was he?" I demanded. "My father." "What was his name?" She hesitated again. That hesitation told me everything. "You still know him?" I said slowly. Her silence confirmed it. My heart started pounding. "He's alive." "Yes." "And he's nearby." She nodded once. Something cold settled in my stomach. "Does he know about me?" I asked. "No," she said quickly. "Not yet." Yet. The word echoed. I backed away, suddenly feeling like the floor wasn't solid. "You kept this from me my entire life." "I gave you a life," she shot back, desperation bleeding through her control. "A safe one, an education, stability, at the cost of the truth." Her voice broke. "Would you rather have grown up hunted?" I didn't answer, because I didn't know. All I knew was that the woman I trusted most had built my life on a secret so massive it swallowed everything else. "I need air," I said. She reached for me instinctively. I flinched. That hurt her more than anything I could have said. I left without another word. Outside, the world looked the same. Cars passed. Birds chirped. Someone laughed on a phone call. But I felt like I was watching it through glass. I wasn't who I thought I was. My name, my history, my origin, all curated. And somewhere out there was a man who shared my blood, who had destroyed my real mother's life, and who didn't even know I existed. Or worse, he did. That night, I didn't sleep. I read the letter again and again. Every word felt like a clue, a goodbye, a warning, and one line wouldn't leave me alone. If he ever learns your name, he will come for you. By morning, I had made a decision. If my entire life was built on a lie, then it was time to find the truth myself, even if it destroyed everything that was left. I didn't tell my mother I was leaving town. I didn't tell anyone. I just packed a bag, took the letter, photographed every document from the trunk, and drove until my phone lost signal. Somewhere between the highway exit and a nameless roadside motel, the shock faded and something sharper took its place. Clarity. If my entire life had been shaped by one man I'd never met, then the only way forward was through him. I started with the smallest thread. The name. It wasn't on my birth certificate anymore, but it was still on the hospital record tucked beneath it. A different last name. Well, I didn't recognize. I typed it into a search engine from the motel room, my heart pounding like I was doing something illegal. Nothing. No social profiles. No news articles. No obvious digital footprint. That alone scared me. Men like that didn't disappear by accident. I went deeper. Property records. Old business registrations. Court filings. Anything with a date around the year I was born. That's when I found it. A civil case from years ago. Sealed. But the names were visible. His and my biological mother's. Filed, then abruptly withdrawn. No judgment. No resolution. Just silence. The lawyer listed on the case was still practicing. I stared at the phone for a full minute before calling. When his assistant transferred me, my mouth went dry. I'm calling about an old case, I said, from about 25 years ago. There was a pause. Paper shuffling. I can't discuss client details, he said carefully. I'm not asking about the case, I replied. I'm asking about her. I said my biological mother's name. The silence on the other end wasn't professional. It was personal. Who are you? He asked. That question hit harder than I expected. I'm her child. Another pause. Longer this time. You shouldn't be calling me, he said quietly. Why? Because if you exist, he said, then someone went to extreme lengths to make sure you didn't. The line went dead. My hand was shaking when I set the phone down. I wasn't paranoid anymore. I was late. I drove back home that night. Not to confront my mother, but to get answers she clearly didn't want to give. She was sitting at the kitchen table when I walked in, like she'd been waiting for days. You spoke to him, she said. It wasn't a question. Yes. Her face drained of color. You promised you'd never look, she whispered. I never promised anything, I said. You decided for me. She stood up slowly. You don't understand what you're pulling on. Then explain it, I snapped. Explain why a lawyer reacted like I was a ghost. She closed her eyes. Because to him, she said, you are. I waited. She took a breath that sounded like surrender. Your father doesn't just destroy people, she said. He erases them. My stomach twisted. He was powerful even back then. Money. Influence. Not flashy. Quiet. Strategic. When your mother tried to leave, she threatened to expose him. She had proof. Financial records. Recordings. And she disappeared before the court date. The word landed like a gunshot. Disappeared how? No body, my mother said. No witnesses. No trail. Just gone. I felt sick, and you took me. I hid you, she said fiercely. I changed everything. Your name. Your records. I raised you like my own. You kidnapped me. I saved you. She repeated, tears finally spilling. Because if he had found you, you would have been leverage. Or worse. I leaned against the counter, my legs weak. Why now? I asked. Why let me find this? She hesitated. Because he's sick, she said. My head snapped up. What? Terminal, she said. Months, maybe less. Relief flickered, and she crushed it. And when men like him know they're dying, she continued, they clean up loose ends. Cold flooded my veins. He's been asking questions, she said. About the past. About her. About you. My chest tightened. How does he know about me? He doesn't, she said quickly. Not fully, but he suspects something was taken from him. Taken. Like I was property. He hired a private firm, she said. They've been revisiting old records, hospital logs, adoptions that don't line up. I laughed, sharp and humorless. So this wasn't an accident. You knew this was coming. Yes, and you still didn't tell me. She reached for my hand. This time I didn't pull away. I wanted you to live one normal life, she whispered. Before everything changed, silence settled between us. What do? I asked. She looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Resolve. We ended, she said, on our terms. The plan wasn't dramatic. That was the terrifying part. No confrontations, no shouting, not even fantasies. Just exposure. The lawyer had gone quiet, but his files hadn't. With the right pressure, the sealed case could be reopened. Financial documents didn't lie, and terminal illness made men sloppy. We leaked pieces, not everything, just enough, anonymously, to journalists who specialized in financial crimes, to regulatory boards, to people who knew how to pull threads without asking permission. The first article dropped quietly. No names, just allegations. Then another, then subpoenas. His name appeared once. Buried, almost unnoticeable, but people like him noticed. 2 weeks later, my mother's tires were slashed. A warning. The next morning, my phone rang from an unknown number. I answered. I know who you are, a man said calmly. His voice was smooth, controlled, older. My blood ran cold. You took something from me, he continued, and now you're trying to embarrass me. I forced myself to breathe. You mean my mother? A pause. Careful, he said softly. Words have consequences. You don't get to threaten me, I said, surprised at how steady my voice sounded. You lost that right when you destroyed her life. He laughed. She destroyed herself, he replied. I just removed the problem. Rage surged, white hot. She had a child, I said. Me? Another pause. Longer. Then quietly, that's impossible. Is it? I asked. Because I'm very real. Silence. I could hear his breathing now. Where are you? He asked. Not somewhere you can reach, I said, and not someone you can erase. His voice hardened. You think exposing me will bring her back? No, I said, but it'll make sure you're remembered for what you are. He hung up. 3 days later, the final article dropped. Names, evidence, patterns. The sealed case was unsealed, and with it, the truth. My biological mother hadn't disappeared. She'd been institutionalized under false pretenses, declared unstable, isolated, silenced. She died alone years later. The man who did it never served a day. Until now. He didn't live long enough to see a courtroom, but he lived long enough to see his legacy collapse. Companies distanced themselves. Boards resigned. Foundations quietly removed his name. And when he died, there was no obituary, just a footnote. I stood at my mother's kitchen window weeks later, watching sunlight spill across the floor. I don't know who I am anymore, I admitted. She came to stand beside me. You're someone who survived, she said, and someone who chose truth. I nodded slowly. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said. She didn't flinch. I know, she said, but I hope one day you'll understand. I looked at her then, really looked. She wasn't perfect, but she wasn't a villain either. She was a woman who made an impossible choice in a world that punished honesty. I'm not disappearing, I said. I'm not changing my name again. She smiled sadly. Good. And I'm going to tell my story, I continued. Not for revenge, for clarity. She nodded. That night, I opened a blank document and began to write. Not to expose, but to reclaim. And before you decide what you think about any of this, before you pick sides, I want to know something. If you were in my place, would you have wanted the truth earlier? Or would you have chosen the lie that kept you safe? Tell me what you would have done and why. And if stories like this make you think deeper about people and choices, make sure you like the video and subscribe, because there are more stories coming that don't have easy answers.